here today to MITRE. This is our first in-person event for award ceremony since pre-pandemic, so it's awesome to be in person with everybody, to get to see you face to face and have conversations. I'm really excited. This is just going to be a lot of fun. And there's also many folks tuning in online. This is being streamed live, so welcome to all of you as well. So this is really a celebration of all your work today over the last semester, so enjoy it. I hope you have a lot of fun. We've got a lot of great speakers lined up today. I'm not necessarily one of them, so I'm going to try to get off the stage quickly, but do have a few quick sort of housekeeping remarks to make. I already said where the coffee is. The bathrooms are also that way, straight out the door. Just keep going straight. If you have electronics, cell phones, please silence them. If you don't have electronics because you checked them at the door, thank you. You can take those. You can take those outside to use them. Please check them back in. If you do that, badges need to be worn at all times, unless, of course, you go outside, in which case turn them in to security office. And if you need anything throughout the day at any time, just look for anyone wearing a purple lanyard. That's a MITRE Engenuity team. They can help you with anything that you need. And by the way, so if you don't know, MITRE Engenuity is a tech foundation, semi-separate, I will say, from MITRE Labs, the organization that I'm in. And a big change to eCTF this year was to bring them in and partner with this, because MITRE Engenuity was really created to collaborate with private industry, like the sponsors that we have here today, collaborate on solving big problems like solving workforce development for embedded security. And so it was through that partnership that we were able to grow to what we did this year, and we want to keep that going. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is from MITRE Engenuity, Ajit Kahaduwe, and he is our Managing Director of Incubation and New Product Development. Welcome, Ajit.
Thanks, Dan. And I want to welcome everyone, myself, to this award ceremony, both online and here in the room. Thank you for coming. Thank you for flying here. I think it's planes, trains, and automobiles to come to this event, so we appreciate all of you that came. And I want to also say, on behalf of our sponsors, MITRE and MITRE Engenuity, congratulations. Everyone, please stand up, give yourself a big hand, and really enjoy. All right. It was, I don't know whether you knew what you were getting into if you were new to the competition, but I'm sure going through 13 weeks, it creates some interesting learnings and testing of your skills and fortitude. So we're celebrating today the award ceremony and the culmination of this year, but the eCTF does not stop today for you. It continues. We are, anyone who has a phone, you can take your phone out now and you can scan this QR code. It'll get you a link straight to our LinkedIn alumni page, where there's other people from the past that are involved in the competition. This will allow you to keep your connections and be able to keep connected to MITRE and the work we're doing on continuing the eCTF. So please do that. And for those of you who want to do social media, take pictures, we want to experience this event with you, and we'd love for you to hashtag eCTF 2023 so we can see the competition award ceremony through your eyes. So please take a lot of pictures, enjoy yourself, and keep us in on the hashtag so we can track what's going on from the competition that we can't see today. So let's talk about the eCTF for a moment. It's such a unique program. I got to really thank Dan and his team, Dan being the founder of this, and putting this together, because we were really serious about how do we solve problems around getting students interested in embedded security, because there's such a need. And it's such a unique competition because it has three components. One, it's focused on embedded security, both with physical and proximity access. It's experiential because you get to play both the attacker and the defender as both a red team and a blue team. And it's not your weekend hackathon. right? You're going to work on this for a long period of time, 13 weeks. You're going to get deep into the problem solving part of it, which makes it such a unique aspect to what we're doing versus anything else that may be done by others. So we really think this is a great way to get connected to embedded security, really exercise problem solving skills, and be able to be both the adversary and the defender really changes the way you look at things. So I think it's a really amazing capability of the program that Dan's team has been able to put together. The eCTF is continuing to grow. It's amazing from where Dan started this program 8 years ago to now. We doubled the number of students involved. So last year to this year, we're now over 500. And the other interesting thing is the differences in the majors involved. It's not just a single major, it's multiple different STEM majors that are getting involved in the eCTF, which I think also helps with embedded security because it is multidisciplinary. You need computer science, you need electrical engineering, you need cybersecurity, so many aspects that have to be thought through. So to think like a hacker in this, you have to have a hacker mindset, and different groups of people have different mindsets. So it really pulls together. And the eCTF has grown so much now, we're not just a US program. We have 5 international countries involved, and we have universities involved from 29 states. And we have within the student population, everyone from a doctoral student to grad to undergrad, as well as we have a group of high school students, which in its own right is amazing that high school students can be part of this. And special shout out to the high school students, right? Watch out for them when they graduate and get into university. They'll be coming after you guys next year. So we're really happy about that. That's a really amazing aspect of the inclusiveness of what we're able to do with the competition, with still rigor, but allowing everyone to participate. Finally, I want to talk to you about today because this is the first year we've had sponsors. MITRE has been doing this on our own for the last 7 years. We thought this year, when Dan approached us to open up the aperture of this competition to bring in sponsors, we were really happy to do that for MITRE Engenuity. And I really want to thank Fortinet, who is the award ceremony sponsor, because we're all here today because they were able to help this program get to this spot. And I also want to thank all the other competition sponsors from CrowdStrike, Analog Devices, Boston Cybernetics Institute, did the great training program for you guys, as well as Rambus. All these companies came together because they believe in the mission. They really want to be able to connect with you. And I really encourage you all, that all the sponsors are here, they're outside. We have set aside time for you to be able to network with them. So really take advantage of that. So to close, we have a great agenda for today. We're going to have all the sponsors getting a chance to come up here and talk about what they're doing. I think it'll be very informative. You all get the chance to get up here. We have all of you getting up for 10 minutes of talk and 5 minutes of Q&A to go through what you did in the competition. And we've set aside an extended lunch break for you to be able to network with each other, with our sponsors. Remember, they're interested in you. Ask them all the questions you can think of because they want to see what you're interested in and what your career path is. And hopefully there's a match that you might find your future employer. I can tell you that it can be, you go from all the options to potential tracks in your life. I can say for myself, if it wasn't for where I co-op when I was in school, I wouldn't have lived in the countries I lived in and I wouldn't have married the woman I did. So it's all based on the company you started with. So sometimes things get rolling because of who you choose. So use this opportunity. So I'd like to now introduce our first speaker from our award ceremony sponsor, who's Hossein Jazi, and he's joining us. He came down from Canada. And Hossein, come on up. He's the Senior Cyber Threat Intelligence Specialist.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hossein Jazi, and I'm Senior Threat Intelligence Specialist at Fortinet. So in this talk, I'm gonna talk a little bit about threat landscape and especially like how it evolved after Microsoft announced to disable internet macros. Actually, my talk is not about embedded like hardware security, but since the guys mentioned, it's good to say the word embedded to make it interesting, so I added the word embedded here. So like before starting my talk, I should mention that like knowing the threat landscape on top of the like threat actors. It's one of the responsibility of threat intelligence analysts. And I think the following slides can give you a good example about like the work a threat intelligence analyst does in his day-to-day basis. So yeah, I'm gonna start with the slides. So at first, I'm gonna talk a little bit about internet macros. So internet macros have been like main initial like infection vector that are used by several nation state and cybercrime threat actors to initiate their attacks. Several like spam campaigns, phishing campaigns have used malicious documents. For those who don't know the like how malicious macros work, so malicious macro is a type of like VB script code that can be embedded within the like Office documents, such as like Word or Excel, and then can be attached to a spam or phishing email, and then sent to the like victims. And when a victim opens the document, they need to enable the content, and when you enable the content, the macro is executed in the background. So macro can be something very simple, like calling the shell function to execute PowerShell to perform some malicious activity, or can be a little bit complicated, such as what APT37, the North Korean actor, used. Like they used the self-decoding techniques to hide their main like macro from the static analysis, or the technique that UAC 0056 used to hide their payload within the macro using a specific technique and drop their payload without connecting to their C2 servers. So the attackers usually try to use a specific lure to convince the victims to open the document. So generic like spam campaigns, they use like something very generic to like convince the user to open the document. For example, the green one on the top is the one that Emotet recently used. But if it's like a targeted attack, they have to use some specific thing. Like the one I showed in the side of the slide is the one used by Lazarus threat actor. They used like Lockheed Martin as a like lure to convince user to open the document. It also can be like a specific document that like they stole from like governments, and they use as a lure to convince the user to open the document. So, but what really happened was that it was February last year that Microsoft has announced that they are going to disable internet macros, because internet macros was like big like issue for everyone, and Microsoft decided to like find a solution to disable this attack. So they started to do the procedure. I took this flowchart in like from Microsoft website. So they have a specific procedure to like allow or like disable the internet macros. And it was the time that we started to observe that threat actor started to adopt new techniques to migrate from like using malicious macros. So this slide shows the like distribution of number of malicious documents we saw at Fortinet. And as you can see, since February 2022, overall, the number has decreased. And it's because like we observed that like the actor started to adopt new techniques. We saw like an increase on like June 2022, which was like related to a specific spam campaign we observed. And also in 2023, we saw the like sharp increase on March. And it was because like Emotet was back to operation, and interestingly, after a year, they started to use malicious document, which was kind of surprising. In next couple of slides, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the like replacement methods that APT's cyber threat actors have started to use. So some of them still try to rely on Microsoft Office documents and use like, instead of using macro, they were trying to exploit some vulnerabilities within the Office document. Some of them are like old vulnerabilities, such as equation editor, or remote template injection, and some of them are new, such as like the vulnerabilities that have been discovered in 2021 and 2022, like Fulina. And I don't have time to go over the details, but like just wanted to mention that we observed this technique that were used by actors in like past couple of months. For example, like for Fulina, it's like misusing it's abusing the Microsoft MSDT to execute like some PowerShell to perform some malicious activities. And as you can see, the numbers have increased in 2022, and we saw the sharp increase in May because the vulnerability was just discovered, and a lot of actors has started to test and use this vulnerability to see how effective this technique is. But it's pretty simple method, so we saw that like threat actors very adopted their TTPs to use this vulnerability. Another method that we observed that threat actors started to use is like virtual disk hard drive, ISO, and VHD files. And this is like the major like infection vector that we observed in past year. So ISO files can be directly like attached as an attachment in a spam email, and they can contains like executable or LNK file to execute some malicious activity. But those ISO files mainly were distributed using HTML smuggling technique. So in the HTML smuggling technique, instead of like attaching ISO file to email, which is a little bit weird, they attach an HTML file to a spam email. And when the end user opened the HTML file, ISO file will be dropped in the like victim's machine, and then like they like open the document and open the ISO file and then like performs the malicious activities. Again, we saw like increase in number of ISO files in February 2022, and even though the number has decreased after August, September, but it's still a number like a little bit increasing. We saw a little bit decrease in March, and this is because like we observed that like it seems everything a little bit slowed down. So some of the actors are back to using malicious macros because they saw or they observed that some of the like people didn't roll out the update or didn't like use the new version of Office. So a Microsoft Office document could be still useful. So LNK file usually are embedded within the ISO file and are used by like actors to load the payload, but LNK files that are the type of shortcut file, you know that. So they can be like directly attached to a spam email too, and like they were like one of the main like type of files that were used in past year by actors, and like we saw a huge increase compared to 2021 and 2020. VHD files is another type of virtual disk file. It's pretty new, and it's only working on Windows version 10 and 11. And since ISO files became popular and like security vendors try to block the ISO files, some of the actors has started to migrate their techniques from ISO file to VHD or VHDX file. And we observed several actors, they use VHDX files, such as Bumblebee, and we also have observed North Korean Lazarus Group also use VHDX file to distribute their payload. Another file type that we have observed used by the actors is like CHM files. CHM files are like Microsoft Office, Microsoft like compiled help files that like if you install some software, you saw the like help files are the CHM file. But CHM files can be used by threat actors to execute some malicious activities. We saw CHM file can be directly attached to like a spam or phishing emails, or can be embedded within the like archive files, and then archive file attached to a spam email. We saw a huge increase in number of like CHM files, and like a lot of threat actors are using those CHM files. Like most well-known threat actor, I guess, like it was APT Bidder in Southeast Asia that were using the like heavily CHM file to target their victims. Another method that actors were used instead of internet macros are HTML files. HTML files are like HTML files that can execute like contains the like a script, VB script code, and can perform some malicious activities. Like for example, this shows an example in which the like HTML file contains like some malicious activity to download the payload, modify the registry, and also load the decoy file to appear it look legitimate a little bit. So again, like we saw like increase in number of HTML files. It's like up and down because like some of the actors were active at some point and then like they were like inactive for a while. But in overall, the numbers have increased compared to like 2021. So these were like some examples that I mentioned, but there are a lot of other techniques that we saw that are used by threat actors to replace internet macros. But beside those like methods, still like threat actors are looking for new methods to replace internet macros. One of the new methods that like has been discovered last year is VSTO files. VSTO files is kind of like add-in file in the like top of .NET file that can be like attached or add to the malicious document, and it's not type of macro, and it can execute some like malicious like PowerShell script or something in the background. So it's kind of pretty new technique, and we only observe one actor has used this technique, but this is something that like we are expecting to see in near future. So what I mentioned so far are like techniques that were mainly used by the actors as a attachment or like in a spam email or phishing email. But what's interesting is that like since that announcement from Microsoft, we saw the increase in the number of other attacks that are using different techniques. So one of them is sock-polish technique. Sock-polish technique is a type of like malware family that use drive-by download. And in this technique, the actor like they are like injecting JavaScript code or on a compromised website, and like they pretending to be software update or installer of different applications such as Zoom or some other applications. So in this type of attacks, when users visit the website, get the file, they like JavaScript will be dropped in the machine and will be executed and perform some malicious activities. So yeah, as I mentioned, like from February last year, the internet macros, like threat actor has started to adopt new techniques to replace new internet macros. But what we have observed in 2023 is last 3 months is that like some threat actors are still trying to use internet macros to initiate their attacks, and it's because like it's a simple techniques and they can like really like use interesting lures in their attacks. So we observed that like some of the actors thought maybe everything is slowed down, so they are still operating their attacks using like malicious documents. Some of the examples that we observed this year are Emoted, Gozi, or some threat actors such as like SiteCopy, Do Not, and Kimsuki. To conclude my talk, so threat actors has started to migrate from Microsoft like macro-based document to different techniques, and some of them are still using a combination of like macros and other techniques, like IceID still like are using a combination of macro document and ISO file to perform its operations. But other than that, we observe that some threat actors are still using macros, and I mentioned some of them. And the other thing we have observed is that like other threat actors, other initial infection vectors are on the rise. This was like very overview of like what happened in past 3 years. So if you have any question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Hossein. We are grateful to have Fortinet as a sponsor and appreciate you taking the time to come speak with the students this morning. My name is Kyle Scaplen, and I am an embedded security engineer at MITRE. Before I get started, I have a few reminders for all the students. First, be respectful of your opponents. So they all worked hard on this as well. We don't want to make anyone feel shamed for any vulnerabilities that you may be pointing out today. Additionally, this event is being recorded, and by participating, you consent to audio and video recording as well as photography. So first and foremost, thank you to all the participants for their dedication and hard work over this semester. This year we had a record-breaking number of schools participating and number of students, with more than double competing from the previous year. Competition isn't possible without the hard work and dedication that they put in. This year we had over 500 registered students competing from 29 states and from 5 countries. And additionally, we saw an incredible mix of students from high schools, undergraduate students, and graduate students, all learning together under the same competition. Uh-oh. Did something happen to this computer?
You're an engineer, fix it.
This one? This one? Yeah. I just don't want to show anything else up here. Okay, it looks good. Great. Okay, next I want to thank all the organizers. It is not possible to do alone, just myself. There's a ton of work that goes in behind the scenes to planning this competition. So I want to give them a big round of applause as well. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about this year's competition. So the eCTF is split into 2 phases. The first phase started on January 18th, where students began designing and implementing their systems to meet a set of security requirements and functional requirements. On March 1st, students could begin submitting their designs to the organizers for handoff. And at this time, we would be testing their designs to make sure they met all functionality requirements. Then, once their design passes testing, they enter into the attack phase, where they get to attack other teams' designs. And if they're able to compromise any of the security goals, they'll receive flags and can submit it to the scoreboard for points. Initially, teams are provided with the list of functional requirements, the list of security requirements, and the hardware that their firmware should target. In addition, to help them get started with their designs, we provide an example design that isn't meant to meet any of the security goals. Then, throughout the competition, they're provided with an automated testing infrastructure that they can submit their design to make sure they're staying on track. And they get organizer support through our Slack channels, and we communicate with them daily on that. This year, teams were tasked with designing and implementing secure firmware for a car and its key fobs. Their design had to support these basic operations. First, they had to provide a way to build these cars and the fobs. Additionally, they had to be able to pair new key fobs with their existing car firmware, package and enable features on their cars, and unlock a car with its key fob. For security goals, the first thing is that a user should only be able to unlock a car if they have the proper fob. Next, if you take away the fob, this should also revoke someone else's access from the car. Third, someone listening in on communications between the key fob and the car should not allow them to later learn from this and use it to unlock the car in the future. Fourth, someone shouldn't be able to pair their own fob with your car. And finally, A user should only be able to enable vehicle features they have access to. The first team I would like to invite to the stage is Team SlugSec from the University of California, Santa Cruz. This is UCSC's first time competing in the eCTF, but you'd never guess it from how well they did. This team was consistently near the top of the leaderboard, and I think you'll understand why once you hear their presentation. Welcome, Team SlugSec.
Hello, we're UC Santa Cruz. I'm Steven, this is Jeffrey, and that's Brian. So first we're going to talk about our secure design. So our secure design was written almost completely in Rust with very little C. The only time we used C was to read uninitialized memory for one of our entry sources in our RNG, which had to be done in C because it's undefined behavior in Rust. Our unlock sequence and pairing sequence both consist of a challenge response protocol where the challenge is also generated with our random number generator. This CSP-RNG is seeded with 4 entropy sources. The first is an EEPROM seed that is device-wide. The second is uninitialized memory, as mentioned before. The third is the ADC temperature sensor's output. And the last one is clock drift, which is the drift between 2 different oscillators. For our features, our package features consisted of a car ID and a feature ID signed using ECDSA with a manufacturer-wide secret. There were a couple of potential improvements that we would have liked to have made in our design. An important note to make, though, however, is that no team was able to pull off any successful attack against our design. The first thing that I would like to mention is that for our RNG, we would like to have hardened it using a von Neumann extractor that would gather the precise amount of entropy per entropy source used within our RNG. And the second thing that we would like to have hardened was to have added anti-glitching measures such as repetitive checks.
Okay, our first attack highlight was on replay attacks exploiting static or timing-based RNG. So a lot of teams have challenge response protocols where they generate a nonce on the car, send it to the fob, and the fob has to do something with that nonce and send it back. A lot of teams use timing or just a static EEPROM seed to seed their RNG. And what we can do is unlock their car at a very precise interval using another microcontroller. And doing that many times, we can gather a lot of challenges and send them to a fob we have temporary access to get all of the proper responses to these challenges. And after that, we take away the fob so that we no longer have access to it. And we can unlock the car again, read its challenge, and then look up its response in our database. Okay. So this attack essentially allows us to unlock a car even after we lose access to the fob. And our suggested countermeasures were to either use a secure source of entropy that is non-deterministic, and also to use multiple entropy sources so that if one is compromised, the others can still work. Our second attack highlight is another replay attack on temperature-based RNG. We didn't actually carry this one out in the end, although we did try. So a couple of teams used temperature sensor readings for their RNG. And this relies on the ADC to take readings, and the ADC itself relies on 2 pins that are exposed to users, the VDDA pin and ground A pin. These are used as reference, and what we can do is desolder the microcontroller and disconnect the pad from ground A. And then we can change the voltage going into ground A to modify what readings the ADC actually gets. So we were able to lower the ADC reading by up to 0x200. And doing this we lowered the temperature required to saturate the ADC from 145 degrees Celsius to 117 degrees Celsius, allowing us to control the RNG essentially. There you go. Wait, oh. Okay, so these are a couple of pictures. I messed up a bit there. Okay, so the impact of this is essentially the same as the other one because it's another replay attack. And our suggested countermeasures are to use multiple sources of entropy instead of just the temperature sensor. Our other attacks included buffer overflows, where we use ROP to extract pins and also unlock cars. We also exploited deployment-wide secrets, where a single fob was able to unlock multiple cars. And pin brute forcing, where inconsistent timing allowed us to guess pins. Some of our unsuccessful attacks include RNG brute force, where misleading documentation led us to believe that we could predict challenges by trying every single RNG seed. And also the use of non-cryptographically secure RNG, where we believe we could calculate the hash because of a weak RNG used in the build process. A few final comments. So some issues that made it difficult for us as attackers were missing or somewhat misleading documentation, and also UART settings that were non-standard, such as 2 stop bits in board-to-board communications. If we had more time and resources, we definitely would have tried to go through with the temperature sensor attacks that we had started with. And also we would have wanted to do power analysis and glitching attacks. And a few things we learned are trust no one and nothing, and also be very paranoid, which helped us a lot in the design process.
So the first attack that we executed was an RSA brute force. This was because there was a small key on this one. So for this, we pulled together the resources of our team and of our friends. And so here's a few photos of that setup. And we have a few more here. And then, well, here's the graveyard. As you can see, there's a melted breadboard on the left side. And then here's a few photos of our setup. On the right side is our remote development server, where we've hooked up a few boards, and this allowed us to have access to them remotely. All right, so with that, does anyone have any questions? Oh, yes.
Explain a little bit. You said you did a temperature, like something for the temperature, like how exactly, like that was exactly, or like I didn't really get that part. Like, how was the temperature?
So some teams use the temperature sensor for RNG, so we wanted to be able to control that RNG so we could do a replay attack.
So when the temperature is like, did you detect the temperature difference as a valid or invalid kind of state?
So there's a temperature sensor inside the microcontroller, and it reads the temperature and exposes it to the ADC. And so some teams, including ours, they kind of take that reading and use it to seed in RNG. They generate random numbers for challenge response.
So if there are any questions, just real quick, if you can talk into the microphone so that folks online can also hear, that would be great. There's a button and you just.
So the temperature adds a little randomness to the RNGs. That's what they use for, right?
What was that?
So they use the temperature sensor as the kind of randomly generator for the RNG. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, this works great. So you mentioned one of your RNG sources was uninitialized memory. So I'm curious, did you modify the startup bootloader to not wipe BSS at similar regions, or did you find some other way to ensure there would actually be uninitialized garbage data that would provide entropy?
That one didn't actually work because the bootloader zeroes memory.
Okay.
Yeah, we
thanks.
didn't fix that. We learned a bit too late.
The code itself is working, but it's just that the bootloader zeroes it out, so it's static there. Yes.
Here you go. We'll just try this. How's that? There you go.
So you said that for the time-based RNG attacks, you were able to build up a database of challenge and responses. How many entries did that have, and why was it feasible to do with the time-based RNG?
Okay, so I tried to go for the ones that didn't have a rotating EEPROM seed, I went for around 100. For the ones with a rotating EEPROM seed, I went for 10 because I had to manually like reflash it every time. And essentially it was feasible because I could just have the microcontroller do it in a loop and have my computer read it out through like a USB to UART dongle.
You just kept trying it until you
I
hit
just
one
kept
of the
trying it
entries.
until like I got 100, and at that point it goes to diminishing returns.
So those elaborate board setups you showed, how did those help you during the competition?
So the remote ones we use mostly during the design phase let us use fewer boards for our entire team. So like, because we shared like, I don't know, like 4 among the whole team, and we didn't need to buy like a bunch of them for everyone.
Question over here.
So with the timing-based RNG, you were able to establish like a consistent relationship between the timing points, but you couldn't choose a specific one. Is that how that worked?
How it works is we can't get it to like exactly precise, but we can get like the timing to like maybe a microsecond or two. So we can't get it exactly so we can control what numbers come out, but we can get it precise enough that we see the same numbers after a few tries.
So in that case, that's why it's only working with the temp fob access compared to some of those other challenges?
It doesn't work with like the one where you get the traces. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I noticed in the...
So was your remote setup only for the attack boards, and did you conduct all of your attacks remotely, or did you always go in person to conduct the attacks using them?
So the remote boards were mostly for the design phase. We did use the remote setup for the attack phase at the start, and then I kept having to go in to like move around wires, so I just took the whole thing home. You first, and then.
I noticed the graveyard of microcontrollers that you have. I'm assuming that's for manipulating the board into trying to access data, like how you did with the temperature thing.
Yeah, quite a few of those were dead, but like I just showed off all of the boards we had. So some of them were still alive. I think 4 of them still worked.
Yeah, I have a question. So you guys said you guys disconnected ground A to get the ADC to saturate to a certain level. Have you guys tried disconnecting VDA?
That doesn't work as the board resets if VDDA is not at a nominal level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said that no one was able to capture any flags from your design. Have you considered any attacks that would work against your design?
Yeah, clock glitching would definitely work against our design. I think it was pure luck that no one actually did it against us.
All right, thank you very much. The next team I'd like to invite to the stage is Team Boilers from Purdue University. They really impressed us throughout the competition by consistently producing high-quality deliverables from documentation and write-ups to their poster, which you should check out at the next break. Welcome, Team Boilers.
So yeah, so we're from Purdue. I'm Jacob White, and this is Siddharth, and the rest of our team is currently over there. And yeah, we had additional members that aren't listed here, but yes. Just as a brief outline, we'll be talking a bit about our design philosophy and sort of what we tried and different ways to improve, and then go on into some of the different attacks that we tried. And as a sort of design philosophy, what we wanted to do is we wanted to sort of laser focus in on defining a comprehensive threat model that considers every possible attack that we could think of during the design phase, and use that to sort of guide the design of our systems. In particular, what we wanted to do is we wanted to avoid over-engineering our protocols and our implementation as well, to avoid introducing bugs, and to sort of implement overlapping security mechanisms to limit the impact and scope of exploits. So going a little bit into how our design works, what we did is we sort of had a list of different attacks that might potentially be leveraged against our system. So one thing we looked at was replay attacks, and so what we did we tried to develop a secure random number generator with introducing multiple entropy sources, using a large random unlock challenge response between the car and the fob for authentication, and also using sort of a decryption algorithm for that. For the challenge response. And for buffer overflows, what we did is we went through and we tried to essentially reset all unused data, like sensitive data like keys and things on the stack, to 0 once we were done using with them, just to make sure that they weren't left in initialized memory. As for side channels, we tried to focus on using only side channel resilient cryptography, focusing in particular on symmetric cryptography, such as the NIST lightweight cryptographic winner ASCON, using that cipher suite, and also avoiding secret dependent, data dependent computation and other things like that. One final thing is that for brute forces, what we did to prevent people from brute forcing the pin, since it was only a 6-digit pin that was used to pair unpaired fobs, was that we hashed and salted the pin to prevent people from pre-computing the hashes, so that by introducing a random salt that was hopefully unknown to the attackers. And furthermore, we introduced a 5-second timeout on any sort of error that we recognized throughout the protocol. For example, someone tried an incorrect pin. And sort of what we started with in the sense was we defined a threat capability matrix of here are some common attacks that people might try, and here are sort of the capabilities, the things that different features that the car might have, and sort of defining, what exactly are we doing to protect from each of these attack scenarios. And yeah, this sort of goes through most of what I talked about. We use symmetric key cryptography, randomized challenge response, and pins. And for the feature, what we did is we distributed a unique feature password, or think of it as more of an identifier in a sense for each car. And feature pair, so that even if someone intercepts and receives a feature password for a specific car or for a specific feature, it can't be used on a different car or a different feature. And so one design highlight that we wanted to talk about was EEPROM layout randomization. I suppose I can talk about this, but essentially what we did is we ended up sort of on each build for each board, we randomized where exactly we identified which areas use sensitive data, and we sort of randomized the locations of where they are in the address of the EEPROM. And the reason that we did this was hopefully that even if an attacker gains access to some of the data that's stored in the EEPROM, they would be unable to discern where exactly the sensitive data might be in the EEPROM without reverse engineering the code. And some brief possible improvements that we could do to our design. We could sort of expand upon the problem layout randomization to also include the binaries themselves, such as randomizing where the text and stack layers are. One particular thing to note is that we could have used better RNG in our implementation. We focused on using the NIST deterministic random bit generators. But some of our, we could have used more entropy sources. I believe we used ADC, uninitialized SRAM, and some static EEPROM data. But we could have also incorporated things like temperature sensors and clock drift, like UCSC had mentioned. Another thing is that providing mutual car fob and fob authentication using digital signatures or MACs. And just to make it harder to impersonate, a fob potentially. Yeah, that was for the most part. And then one other thing is that we wanted to prevent fault injection attacks, or code glitching or any of those sorts of attacks, just to prevent any possibility of glitching. And so now I'll hand it off to Siddharth for the attack phase.
Yeah, so during the attack phase, we came up with a pretty good idea of like doing a stack leak. So basically, what happens is that we had some teams for which we had like buffer overflows and we had exploits prepared for the buffer overflows, and some teams had like very good implementations with no buffer overflows. So we wanted to try to attack these implementations. And what we noticed was that on the design phase, they had provided us the bootloader. We tried to reverse engineer the bootloader to see what happens inside the bootloader, and we figured out that it only wipes the flash memory and it does not touch the SRAM. And we noticed that some teams leave sensitive data on the SRAM, and then so our idea was that we would flash a victim team, which is a very secure design. And then immediately after sensitive data comes on top of the stack, we would flash another team, which we had an exploit ready for. And then if the stack layouts don't overlap on top of each other, we can use the buffer overflow to gain execution and then to kind of leak out the sensitive data. So this implementation, like this attack kind of worked for a lot of teams because the data was not immediately cleared during execution. But however, the attack phase bootloader cleared out the SRAM, and this kind of mitigated the attack on the keyed boards. This is a common pattern that we noticed, that teams would do some sort of check for the pin or like a mem compare, and then if the comparison fails, they immediately go to a sleep phase. So this kind of gave us some time to kind of reflash another team. However, like a prevention would be to kind of immediately, if the comparison fails, wipe out the memory and then go into a sleep state. And apart from this, this attack is still viable because it's again a timing-based attack. If you are able to flash at the exact possible time, we should be able to get any flag. Another attack highlight is basically we try to attack teams which had weak random number generators. It's the same thing that UCSC mentioned. We saw that they had they mainly like some teams mainly relied on timing-based clock values for the PRNG, and we were trying to basically generate a dictionary of challenge and responses, and then use these to kind of attack those teams' temp fob access. Other attacks we had were basically shared secret attacks, brute force when there were no delays, and finally, buffer overflow attacks for some of the teams. Apart from these, some comments that we had is like the difficulties that we had to attack teams. So basically, like there were a lot of inconsistencies between the documentation and the code. We made assumptions based on the documentation, which were not true. We had teams using Rust. Not many of our team members were familiar with Rust. So, and then, secure designs. CMU, I'm looking at you. And then, our team was attacked by CMU at the starting, and then we were not able to figure out like why we were attacked. Turns out it was a clock glitching, which we kind of didn't even consider in our threat capabilities. We had pretty much considered every other possibility. But yeah, I mean, because we use the SRAM as one of the sources of entropy for the PRNG, that kind of reduced the efficiency of our PRNG. And the stack leak, again, we did not think of this during the design phase, but it's definitely a possibility. Apart from that, yeah, we would have tried, like, given more time, we would have improved our design, prevented fault injection, and then in the attack phase, like, tried side channel attacks and stuff like that. And one thing that we took away is that we did not go through the rules properly. We did not know that teams would lose points if we submitted a flag later. We kind of went ahead with the assumption that the dynamic scoring was similar to what is commonly seen in CTFs. So we thought, okay, someone gets a first blood, we'll just go for the second blood at some later point of time. And that kind of came back to bite us. That's it, yeah.
All right, we'll now open the floor for a few questions.
This is not the first time I see this. Good morning. Okay. Multiple teams said there's a buffer overflow vulnerability in lots of designs. However, in the original source code, assume that a lot of people uses the original source code they provided. The default buffer is 256 bytes, and a UART transformation, UART is only 8 bits, so that makes the whole thing 256 exactly. Then where exactly is the buffer overflowing? Like because you have to interact with some kind of UART communication before you can buffer over, because we tried that as well and we failed already. So it's like I wonder, where did you find the buffer overflow vulnerabilities? Like where exactly is happening?
So there was a UART read line function, which kind of reads until you get a /n character. So there was no check on the size. It's basically a host UART communication for in the fob for the enable feature and the pin.
So the UART read lines from the default TivaWare library is it will keep adding into the buffer until that like it meets a okay, I got it. Thank you.
It's not from the UART library. It's from the UART wrapper that the eCTF team provided.
But yeah, that's the issue. Like but all the UART transformation, like if I send you a bit and you use that like length as the thing, but only a UART can transmit 8 bits. That's 255, but that's still like not.
No. You're confused between the board link file and the UART file. So there were 2 files for the communication between 2 boards and between the host and the board.
Right.
So there were like the bug was between communication between the host and the board.
Oh, the host.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the UART.c file, not the board link.c file. Got it. Thank you very much.
And then some teams had the same bug, but the buffer size was not 256. The buffer size was less than 256, or they kind of arbitrarily changed the starting address of the buffer.
So your attack with pausing execution of a secure design, like right when it puts sensitive data on the stack and then flashing a new design, is really cool. Did you ever actually get flags from that?
I mean, we tested it on a couple of teams with that the normal boards, and we were able to get flags. I think we even got one from CMU, and we were like extremely thrilled. But when we tried it on the attack boards, it basically just spit out like null bytes. So because they had like cleared out the SRAM on the attack boards, which was not the case on the bootloader for they had given us for the design phase.
Do you know why that difference occurred, or did it just not work?
No, I mean, it's the organizers just decided to clear out the SRAM. So I'm not sure if it was like a intended fix or like just happened by chance.
Hey, so how did you determine which cryptographic protocol to use, and was there any like specking out that went on in deciding that?
Yeah, so the main thing I considered when I was trying to design that was I wanted to look for something that was well studied both in theory and in practice, and two, sort of was side channel resilient, and also sort of not error prone. It's not a relatively robust design. So we ended up choosing the Ascon cipher suite for both hashing and encryption. The main reason with that is because one, it was the side channel was sort of the main focus of why it was made in the first place, and two, it was a lot more robust against things like, for example, ASGCM, which if for example you reuse an odds once, it's that essentially is catastrophic for ASGCM. But Ascon, things like Ascon give a lot more tolerance for that sort of thing, and especially since we're using weak randomness for generating our nonces, we wanted to make very, very sure that we wanted something that was relatively robust cryptographically against attacks like that.
Thank you, Team Purdue. In the interest of time. Have a short break, and we'll resume at 10:50 a.m. There's coffee and water out in the atrium. Sponsors, if you could please meet us by this door closest to the stage for further instructions on your sponsor highlight portion of the day. Thank you. So as a reminder, we have two selfie walls set up outside. There's one at the far wall in the back left of the atrium as you walk out, and then there's another one just on the other side of this back wall. If you do end up taking pictures, please remember to tag us at MITRE Engenuity. And if you want to check out the pictures that we're posting, you can go check out that page as well. So next, I would like to introduce Matthew Puckett. Matthew is a senior manager in threat and research and adversarial emulation, who is joining us from one of our platinum sponsors, CrowdStrike. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, everyone. Well, it's been a while since I've given an in-person speech to an audience like this. I'm excited, guys. All right. So my name is Matt Puckett. I lead CrowdStrike's adversarial emulation teams. We're a group of offensive security experts that try to be the bad guy and attack our products before the threat actors do. We're within CrowdStrike's malware. Can you tell it's been a while, guys? We're within CrowdStrike's malware research center. And CrowdStrike's mission is we stop breaches. We're going to talk more about that in a minute here. But I wanted to start by saying you guys should all congratulate yourselves. This is a really hard thing. You've had to play both sides. Actually, it's even worse than that. You've had to design the system and then play both sides. And this stuff is hard. So if you didn't realize that going in, I'm sure you do now, and you can all appreciate it. So again, congratulate yourselves. You all have done an amazing job. I've been impressed. Yeah, round of applause, guys. I've been impressed with what I've seen so far, and I'm excited to see what we've got next. Now, why does this competition matter? Why eCTF? Embedded systems are everywhere. We know that, right? But let's consider the case here, the car. Yeah, I had to Google this. I didn't know, but the average age of a car is apparently 12 years in the United States. It's potentially decades these systems have to last and have to be resilient against attacks, right? And who are attacking these systems? What's the threat landscape? So criminals, obviously, people steal cars, that sort of stuff, but also nation state groups. If you guys don't believe me, check out the Vulcan files that leaked recently on an actor we track as Voodoo Bear, also known as the Sandworm team. But we've got, everyone, like I said, from folks trying to steal cars to people trying to take down power grids. I mean, so it's a real problem. This is a real challenge, and this is not just a academic exercise here. This matters. This competition is a fantastic opportunity for you guys to hone your skills, learn from all your peers, right? That's what you're doing here, these presentations, and gain real-world experience. And I want to emphasize that, and that the problems you guys have faced here are problems that real-world engineers, software developers, everyone else has to deal with. I laughed when I saw the presentation saying, "Oh, the documentation is outdated," or it's not right. Oh my God, it's not going to change, guys. Get used to that. It's not going to change. Oh man. But that's the real world, right? Like you go through, you dive deep into something and you're like, this is wrong. Like, you know, I've got to fix it. I got to get it right. And so by participating in this competition, you're not just sharpening your own technical expertise, you know, that's good, but you're also, you know, helping and contributing to the broader cybersecurity community, right? Because it's not just you and your team. Everyone else who's participating is learning from you, right? So I just want to encourage each and every one of you. Like I said, this is hard. You guys did a lot of amazing work, but continue the career in this field. This is an exciting field. You're really only limited by your creativity, right? And the impact you get to have here really does make a tangible difference in people's lives. One, yeah, we don't want our cars to get stolen, we want the lights to be on. But two, you know, you get to safeguard people's, you know, security, data, privacy, all those sorts of things. So again, another round of applause, and I'm just blown away with what you guys have done here. So.
Thanks, Matthew. If you haven't had the chance to check out their booth, the sponsors all have tables outside as well in the atrium, so go check those out. The next team I would like to invite to the stage is the Muffin Mob from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. WPI is one of the original 4 teams to compete in the eCTF back in 2016. Although both students and professors have come and gone since then, they've put together a team to compete in every year since then. Welcome, my alma mater, WPI.
All right. So our team is called the Muffin Mob. The reason we're called that is because our advisor has one cat named Muffin, who's pictured here. This year, we had 6 members on our team. That's up from 4 last year. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic. Okay, so our design. It's going to be the first part. Then the attack phase highlights. You know, pretty standard. You've seen 2 of these. So we built with Rust. We're one of 2 teams that used Rust. So we didn't really have any problems with buffer overflows, but Rust led to a lot of other challenges. We tried to keep our packet format as simple as possible. So we just went with message, nonce, and then HMAC. We used unique secrets for every car and fob pair. Almost made that mistake, but we didn't. And we used digital signatures to verify the authenticity of the packaged features. Unpaired fobs don't have any secrets. That's another important one. We love XCHA-20 Poly 1305. That's really what all of our stuff is based on. It's great because it is resilient to timing side channel attacks, unlike AES. It's also pretty good against power side channels, and it's pretty battle tested, pretty mature, but also not like super well-known, super documented like AES. So there's, you know, the little taste of security through obscurity there. Nonces are randomly asterisk generated by the receiving party. We have that someone very good at crypto designed this. I didn't design that part. So we have a 256-bit password for the fobs that unlocks the car. We have kind of like a challenge response thing going on. Then we have PBK DF2 to generate a key. Yeah. We have elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman exchange to generate symmetric keys for the paired fobs. And then, yeah, the unpaired fob sends the pairing request, and then the paired fob receives the request and verifies it. So cars don't actually know their passwords. The pair fobs don't know their pins. So the car password verification process is replicated here just with the fob's pin instead of the car's password. And if the pin is correct, the fob responds with a packet containing the secrets. So really the important thing that we tried to emphasize is security isn't created through like checks, like branches. Security is created through the fact that no piece of the equation has access to data that it's not supposed to have access to. So even if like there's some sort of glitching attack or like some sort of weird buffer overflow or like control flow hijacking, the data isn't physically present where it's not supposed to be, or it's encrypted. So it's mathematically impossible to get at it. Yeah, so feature package, we have a pre-generated nonce. Fob decrypts and verifies the package. And yeah, so sending a package for car 2 to a fob for car 1 will obviously fail. So creating a new package is impossible without the target car feature signing key. So we have our symmetric keys, and then we also have the feature signing keys. Okay, so where is the important part? Yes, that's the important part. So this is what I want to focus on. We made the crucial mistake of relying on entropy coming from the host tools for our RNG. That's bad because it is fixed and it's stored in the EEPROM, which means it's repeatable. So if you hit the reset button on our design, you're all of a sudden going to be getting the exact same random seed. That's why we lost 2 of our flags to a few teams. What we should have done is we should have incorporated a lot of entropy sources. So there was the thermal source of entropy. There was the clock difference one. I believe there was one other one. So we kind of considered all of those and we were like, well, I mean, it's fine, right? Because we have entropy coming from the host tools. It wasn't fine. You always need to have a lot of entropy sources at every step of the equation, and don't assume that your entropy sources are good enough because you think that you've thought it through and like you're like, yep, we're good. You always just want to put in as many sources as possible and combine them, mix them up, get entropy every step of the way wherever you can. Okay, attack phase highlights. So buffer overflows. The previous 2 teams already touched on this. We thankfully found the UART read line last year, so we already knew about that vulnerability coming into this year. So one of the first things that we decided to do was develop exploits for that. And so we had exploits ready to go like a few weeks into the design phase. So then as soon as we were able to get into the attack phase, we were able to just like adapt those a little bit to teams and start getting flags. So the generic attack is you just look for any function that calls UART read line. And then if the team didn't use memory protections, then we can use just like code injection and basically dump EEPROM and flash like that to UART just by calling the right UART function. There was one team who did use memory protections, which made our life a lot more difficult. So we needed to construct a ROP chain to effectively do the same thing. And it was a very complicated and gross looking ROP chain, but it did work. So yeah, we shell code in quotes. Obviously there's not a shell, but you know, we're not being pedantic, it's shell code. Yeah, so countermeasures, modify UART read lines so that you're performing bounds checking, or better yet, just read a fixed number of bytes. Don't worry about new lines because that is just adding complexity, and complexity is bad. Okay, secret reuse. This is another one that's already been touched on. A lot of teams use the same keys or secrets for every device, including the fob 0, which was kind of like the white box one. So upon getting that fob, we pretty much were able to just get those secrets and have the secrets for everything. Yeah, we can unlock any car with the information gained from that one fob. We were really close to making this mistake. We, like, very late in the design phase, it might have even been after the attack phase begun, we noticed this issue. So we kind of scrambled to fix that, and then also to get the eCTF into our design. So that was kind of like a last minute thing. Surprisingly, that didn't break, which was good, except for the RNG thing. So yes, obviously you don't want to use global secrets. Even if it seems like it's okay, probably still not the best idea to use global secrets. Blu-ray did it, didn't work. Packaged features. If you reuse secrets in packaged features, that's also bad. Some of the features didn't have crypto. That's pretty bad. Shouldn't do that. Another really exciting one was there was a typo in the build script that caused secret injection variables to not be used. And so it was kind of like a templating string thing, and the secrets were just exactly the same for everything. And they never even used their generated secrets, which was sad because otherwise it probably would have been cryptographically secure. Good things that y'all did. Not reusing secrets. Not having the UART readline buffer overflow vulnerability. Signing package features, that's a big one. Yeah. And really the big thing that we would have done if we had had more time is we would have made better RNG. So there is actually one thing that is not in these slides that I'd like to touch on, which is our defense against fault injection attacks. We have this macro in Rust called double down if, and effectively what it does is every time that we have a branch or just something that would use an if, we can replace it with this double down if macro. And then when the code is compiled, it does the same thing as if, except it does it twice. So if you do like some sort of clock glitching or something and you're able to get past the first one, you're just gonna hit the second one. And being able to get that timing just right so that it bypasses both of them is gonna be like significantly orders of magnitude more difficult than just being able to mess up one branch with clock glitching or voltage glitching or something. Yeah, then we have the screenshot of when we noticed that we were using the same secrets for everything in the upper right. So lessons learned. I suppose this is going to be heard a lot today, but anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Critically examine everything. To echo the words of the first presenter, trust nobody and nothing. Yeah. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, so I had a question about, you mentioned that you use eCTF, David Hellman, for key agreement. I was just curious, did you consider man-in-the-middle attacks in that sense? Just, you have party A, party B, and did you consider someone in the middle who might sort of like try to interact in the key exchange to actually get the key at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's kind of like what eCTF is meant to defend against, because you've got Alice and Bob, and they both have their private and public keys, and then that exchange occurs. I don't know if it's called keys in the context of eCTF, but secrets and information. And then you consider Eve, your man or woman in the middle. Even if Eve is able to get everything that's going across, like all the public information, there's no way to reconstruct the secrets that are generated. And so then we can use eCTF to do a secure confirmation of like, yes, this is actually legit.
I see. So you used one of the MITM secure ones. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So kudos for good crypto design or crypto protocol design, the concepts you were talking about in the beginning, making sure that you minimize the amount of secret storage, like the fob not knowing its own PIN, all great things. And I think that helped with protecting your flag. It was just the 2 flags, right, due to the RNG. I guess question 1, how did you realize the RNG issue? And then the other thing real quick, you said there was issues with Rust. So I dare you to say something bad about Rust.
Oh, Dan, I have a lot of bad things to say about Rust. So addressing your first question, this is definitely something that we're going to try to improve on next year, because the way that we realized we had that problem was just kind of like thinking about it and drawing it out and like considering it. And while that's great to do and should be done, it's not a rigorous way to do it. So going forward, we're going to try to put more effort into hardware and software infrastructure. So like testing, like having the boards physically hooked up to automated testing to try to nip that kind of stuff in the bud. Yeah, and then regarding Rust, there's no need to bore people with specifics, but the high level idea is Rust looks great on paper until you have to learn it. It's hard to learn, it's unintuitive. Every character you type, you get like 3 errors. They don't make any sense. Like if you theoretically were able to get together a team of all extremely skilled Rust developers, it would be pretty much invincible. But actually doing that in practice is very difficult. And then also you can't pass that on to the next team because they don't know Rust. So it's hard to transfer code. I think in the far future, Rust has great promise, but it's just really, really an uphill battle right now.
All right. Thanks, Iv. The next team we would like to invite to the stage is Team SIGPwny from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. This team is a relative newcomer to the eCTF, as this is only their second year competing. Despite noticing a flaw in their design soon after entering the attack phase, they were able to hold on to all of their flags up until the last week of the competition. Welcome, UIUC.
Hello, everyone. We're SIGPwny, the undergraduate team from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm Richard. This is Jake and Min. This year, we've had over 25 people participate in an eCTF, which is up from the mere handful of people that we had last year. This is our second year doing this competition. A brief overview of our presentation. First, we'll cover our design phase, the design protocol that we had, Pony Parrot, and then give 2 attack phase highlights and end off with some lessons learned.
Right, so I'll be talking about our design phase. So one of our strategies was to not write any code until our protocol was fully fleshed out. That way we don't have any glaring protocol mistakes. And then it also allows all of our members to pretty easily get into coding because we have pretty good docs and an idea of what we want to implement. We also made sure not to use any magic numbers and constants throughout our code. We tried to use all well-defined constants so that we don't have any inconsistencies in like the way we calculate our message lengths. We wrote our implementation primarily in Rust, which limits a lot of potential memory mistakes. We used ECDSA for our message signing because normal encryption doesn't provide integrity and authentication. And for our RNG, we used initial SRAM state, which, as it turns out, might be compromised on the attack bootloader, event timing, and a lot of CPU temperature samples. We also made sure to employ timeouts in order to prevent timing side channels and brute force attacks. So our pairing process, when we get the correct pin, is we send the pin from the host, the paired fob validates, then waits for a total of 0.8 seconds before sending it off to the unpaired fob. If we have an incorrect pin, we wait for an additional 4 seconds for a total of 5. We hash and salt the pin so that the fob has no idea what the pin is, and it's difficult to do side channels because it's not just a simple hash. And then we use this to encrypt the messages so that we can also prevent some glitching attacks. And then the unlocking process, you press the button, it sends challenge nonce to the fob. The fob will sign the challenge, the car verifies, and then we wait again for a total of 0.8 seconds before acknowledging on the host. And then if you are not an authenticated fob, you'll wait again for 4 seconds. Then for feature validation, we have a signed message that includes the car ID and the feature number. It's signed by the manufacturer private key and verified on the car with the public key. So what we want to do better next time is some teams have pointed out, we had a bad secret generation. We misunderstood how deployments work. We thought there was a new one for each car, and there isn't. So we shared the same secrets across all of the car and fob pairs. And we also, in the future, would want to secure our unpaired fob by having a secure key pair between them. And we also more deliberately want to consider hardware attacks like power and EM side channels, as well as fault injection attacks. Now on to me.
Actually, on to me again. I'm going to talk about buffer overflow. Everyone's spoken about this because this is definitely the most common exploit that we've encountered. UR readline function is in the insecure example, and this function is vulnerable to buffer overflows because it keeps reading until a new line. So if you pass it a fixed size buffer, you can get it to overflow as long as you don't send a new line in your payload. If the buffer is on the stack, we can overwrite the return address and then jump to our shellcode, which we also read in. For this particular example, there's some information on the stack that we're trying to exfiltrate, so we can't read in a very long shellcode. So what we do is we have a two-stage shellcode that reads in a second stage. The formatting kind of got messed up here. But stage one on the left reads in the second stage, which can be much larger. And this lets us get very large payloads running on these devices. So this attack is critical in severity because it allows us to get arbitrary code execution on the devices. And it's especially impactful because there are very little mitigations on these embedded systems, unlike modern desktop systems. However, there's a simple patch. Just don't use UR readline, or patch the UR readline function to limit the size that it reads.
Okay, I'll talk about our second attack on it. So some teams use their RNG with either random bytes in program which are generated on compile, or the tick timer value. And on future unlocks, it will commit these new random values to the program flash. But as it turns out, they're not really random. The board can be reflashed, so you can recreate those random values. So that means the only true source of entropy used is the tick timer when the car is unlocked. And the tick timer runs very fast on the highest possible clock speed, so that's on the manner of some microseconds. And obviously, a human can't feasibly press a button to unlock the car and exact tick value. So we'll demonstrate the attack with the two boards. We'll represent them as fob and car. And then we have our standard pin set up with ground and UART communications. And the fob also has the switch to unlock the car. So when the switch is pressed, it will generate an unlock. It'll send that to the car. Its formatting's messed up. And then the car, once it receives that unlock, will log a tick timer value, which we'll call X. And then it will generate the nonce X based on that timer value. And then it'll send it to the fob, and the fob will have to respond with the correct response to that nonce. And this changes based on when the car receives that unlock request. So you can have tick timer value Y or Z, and the fob will have to respond differently. So now we have an evil fob. We don't really need the switch because all we need to do is send the unlock request. And the goal is to send the unlock request at an exact or reproducible tick timer value X, so that it will always generate nonce X. And the way we do this is we create a fourth wire, which is LED to GPIO. So I think CMU mentioned that they use just a general checking for reset. We check when the car LED turns on, because the car, when it powers on, it might turn on some LEDs, it might turn them off. And so what this does is we can precisely sync when the car is ready, and we can properly, so when the car turns on the LED, it will activate the wire, and then we have the evil fob check, it will activate and interrupt, and it will respond to the LED on the car, and then it will send the unlock request at that exact moment. The car will receive that unlock, and it generally will get it at the same tick value and send the same nonce every time. So how we attack this is stage one, we execute the timing attack with the evil fob in the car. So we have kind of a man in the middle kind of thing going on here. It will execute the timing attack against the car. It will record possible nonce messages. We actually only get we only need to do this 2 or 3 times before we're able to get a nonce collision. And then stage 2, we mode switch. So now the fob is disabled, but the evil fob will simply just replay from its stored nonce in response, and then it will unlock the car. And so, yeah, this is very reproducible, as we mentioned. It only took 2 or 3 attempts. Attack severity is kind of moderate. It allows an attacker to control RNG. Obviously, this will only work if the system only uses timing for their RNG, and it only works with temporary fob access. So the fix is to use more environmental entropy, more sources, more samples, and then your system becomes, you'll have better RNG for those systems.
All right, so I'll talk about some of the other attacks we employed. One of the more common ones we used was pairing pin enumeration. There are only 2 to the 24 pins, so sending those out at your line rate only takes a few hours. There are a lot of just subtle broken implementations, like the timer might not start, might do memcompare wrong, compiler might optimize away your delay loop. And if you use string compare instead of memcompare, if the starting byte is a null byte on both strings, it'll pass. And then there are just some examples of insecure crypto as well. Some final comments: read the spec and make sure to read it again. Like, we misunderstood deployments. There's lots of little things like that. Have multiple layers of security they can fall back on. Test all the individual components of your implementation so you don't just have like small flaws that just break your really good implementation. Be careful with crypto. Use well-known methods and protocols and patterns that are known to be safe, and understand the limits of the methods that you choose. And the compiler won't always be your friend. You might invoke undefined behavior that works at one optimization level, not another. Even when it's not exploitable, it might cause functional issues. And some comments about the attack phase. Watching the scoreboard can be a double-edged sword. You know, you might assume a flag's really hard to get, or you might waste your time on something that's not even worth that many points because you think it's too easy. Read the implementation, not the intention, right? Like, if you see a comment, it's safe, bro, trust. Maybe verify that. You know, a compiler might optimize away a loop even if a comment says that it works. Validate things even if they seem correct, right? A lot of implementations looked great, but then fob0 opens all the cars. Like, what's up with that, right? And is the challenge actually changing? Maybe the random nonce generation is just slightly broken in a way that's really hard to see. Thank you. Now we're moving to Q&A.
Anyone have any questions?
For the replay attacks, did you guys have to do any waiting after the LED turned on, or did you immediately just send a message when it turned on?
Yeah, so we had to set like a systig timer value to wait for, and we set just a defined value. Like, we kind of trialed and errored until we were able to, you know, until like the UART is set up on the other board and it can receive communications to unlock the car. Okay. So there is a delay. It's not instantaneous, but there is a fixed delay.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, you mentioned that you use eCTF. So yeah, so you guys mentioned that you use eCDSA. That was just for feature verification, correct? Like, when you actually generated the signatures, that was by the manufacturer when packaging the features, right?
Right. So we also used eCDSA for car unlocking. So all communications between our fob and our car, we had one key pair for fob and car, which was used for unlocking, and we had another key pair for car and factory, which is used to validate the features.
Okay. One attack I was actually considering with that is with eCDSA. They have that whole secret nonce thing, where if you can leak even a few bits of the secret nonce, like when you actually look at a trace of the signature generation, you can actually use that to reveal the signing
right.
key.
Yeah.
That was the attack we had actually considered doing, but we didn't have time to actually implement.
Well, yeah. One thing we're considering implementing is that we would have also implements Diffie Hellman exchange.
Right.
So that way we're using different keys. But at the time we didn't have like our entropy set up like finished yet, so we couldn't like generate new keys. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think another thing is also considering using like EDDSA, like the Edwards curve one. I think that one is more secure against secret nonce.
Yeah, we used the P256 curve
right?
For reference. But yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to comment that.
Is that 80,000 loop getting optimized out thing based on a true story?
Yeah.
Did you end up resolving that, and how
Oh,
did you
sorry.
do it?
Well, this was just it was something we noticed in our team. That's not in our implementation. We wrote in Rust, so we don't have. Or well, I mean, I guess it could be.
Yes.
It could be
as,
Rust syntax
as a
as well,
fellow
but
Rust
yeah,
user, I can
it's
confirm we never have any compiler issues.
No. It's possible on Rust. It is.
Hey, so how did you organize with such a big team?
Yeah, so what we did was we split up into, during our design process, we split up into 3 teams. So we had one team focused on features, one team focused on unlocking, and one team focused on pairing, yes. And so we kind of all worked on our like protocol implementation separately, and then we kind of got together and like whiteboarded out like what we thought, like provide input, like input and hear feedback from everyone. And then in the attack phase, we split up into 2 teams, and we had one team kind of working on attacks against some schools, and another team working on attacks against, the other half.
When did you realize your design was insecure? And given how long, if it was a long time, did you ever think you'd make it through the competition with no one noticing?
Yeah. So we noticed literally the day after our design was released out to the attack phase. So I remember this. Like I was like so depressed. Like I was like, we're going to get pwned instantly, and it's going to be over for us. And yeah, we somehow managed to make it through like the month and the few weeks without that happening. We think it was because our code was written in Rust, and that kind of deterred everyone. But yeah.
One more quick. So I love that you bring up the compiler issue because I've spent a large part of my career working with that exact problem. But also I love the LED timing attack. I noticed though in your countermeasures for that, you said use more environmental randomness, entropy. What about not using the LED to indicate exactly when you're doing
Yeah,
things?
that also works too. Yeah, if you just never turn on your LEDs, you'll probably be chill.
So, well, but if they didn't, then have you thought about what you do in that case?
So actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the secure bootloader does turn on some LEDs. So if you turn off LEDs, that's also an indication that you might have, you can still use LEDs in that sense. But if you don't touch LEDs at all, then in that sense, that attack probably would not happen. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Doug Gardner. Doug is a chief technologist at Analog Devices, one of our platinum sponsors. Welcome.
All right, so I'll start with the first obvious question, and that is, who is Analog Devices? So Analog Devices, we are where data is born. Basically, it's where the real world meets the digital world. So we obviously, due to our name, you'd imagine we make a lot of analog sensors, accelerometers, temperature gauges, a lot of the things you guys were playing around with. We are in 35 countries. We have our revenue spread out across the world, basically a quarter in each region. We have, the Americas, EMEA, Greater China, and Asia, the rest of Asia. And so we're quite worldwide. And we cover a broad spectrum of industrial areas, industrial control systems, consumers, health, automotive, communications, like wireless, etc. And that's enough about the company. So now I'll give you a warning. I'm going to maybe throw things at you. So we're going to start with a question. Since this is all about the key fobs and attacking cars, to see how good your history is. In 2002, and this may be inaccurate information, so be careful. In 2002, the first hack occurred. It affected VW, Audi, Porsche, and Ford. What was that attack? Does anyone know? No. You know? Okay. No. Good guess. I'll just throw it at you anyway. There you go. All right. Well, that's what happens. All right. So it was they reprogrammed the powertrain so the cars could go faster. And then the automotive companies basically had to still warranty it because they had no way to detect that anyone had changed it. And then they started to think that this is not very good for their warranties. So 2010, this attack affected all car brands. What did they use to attack the car? They were able to get into the ECU. They were able to unlock cars, start cars, turn off cars. No guesses. Go ahead. It might have been on the CAN bus, but not the device I was looking for. Go ahead. No, it's simpler than that. All right, go ahead. Yeah, all right. Well, what I was looking for is it was actually the wireless tire pressure. The wireless tire pressure gauge is always the simplest, stupid thing that causes you problems. That's why security stinks. They had no security for the tire pressure gauge because it was harmless. Well, it unfortunately wirelessly connected to the ECU and could get into other things that maybe weren't so well protected. 2011, there was a key fob attack that affected 19 manufacturers. What was the interesting fact about this 5 years later? Go ahead.
All of the manufacturers are still vulnerable to it?
Yes. Good job. 5 years later, 100% were vulnerable to it. So, you know, it shows you how the life cycle is so important. Because just because you think you made something right, or even if you found the flaw, doesn't mean you can correct the flaw or update it depending on the design. All right, I guess I have two more balls. I guess I still have more questions. I do have things to talk about I thought would be interesting, but we may never get there. All right, in 2023, in April, not that long ago, someone was able to unlock, start, and drive a car. How did they attack the car? Yes. Awesome. All right. So what they did is they were able to get in through the side of the car, just real simply, and connected to the headlight. Now, that doesn't seem very harmful, does it? Right? Well, one of the things that you don't think about is the car is becoming Ethernet. Everything about the car is becoming Ethernet. Whether it's, okay, some is CAN bus, some is this, some is that, but sooner or later, X number of years forward, it'll all be Ethernet. So what they're able to do is basically just tap into one of the lights. Those lights are controlled with a bus. They are not controlled with your switch that you turn on and off thinking you control your lights. And they were basically able to just jump on, get into the protocol, and they could unlock the car, do everything. They didn't even need to mess with the key fobs. And then my last question is, the manufacturer will be unnamed, but there was a correctly, securely designed system that was on the production line for approximately 6 months when they discovered that all their vehicles had been programmed with the same key. Does anyone have any idea what went wrong at that factory? They used a GPS signal as part of their random seed. It worked great in the labs, and when they put it inside the manufacturing environment, the GPS was jammed. There was test code in there that said if it couldn't access the signal, that they would then use a default value. That same default value was programmed in every single car for a period of time before it was discovered. So, all right, so I guess I didn't ask a question. I'll just throw the ball now. I don't know who. All right, sorry. So let's talk about what's going on in the future, right? The world is becoming what I would call hyper-connected. All the barriers are being dropped. Things are going wireless. They're Ethernet. The firewalls, all those are fun things to play with. But at the end of the day, they're going away. You need the end-to-end mutual authentication, things like zero trust and things like that. And that's really where security is going. So if you take, for example, like our company, we make a sensor, and that sensor, we have DSPs on it that may be doing processing. We might have accelerators. We have machine learning engines that are getting pushed toward the edge sensor. Those edge sensors are not dumb sensors. They are becoming very smart sensors, and they're updatable, and they're running code, and they're controlling your airplanes, your industrial control systems, your cars, and they require security, because anything that can be upgraded and modified, anything that can be touched and tapped, you guys all demonstrated how with a standard interface, it's very easy to communicate to it with some pretty good test equipment that makes you pretty powerful. And that's happening even on headlights in cars. And so be careful. Security will get you at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. All right, a couple announcements before we begin the next break. So if you are going to take pictures and post them in front of the posters outside, please just make sure that you hide any of the badges that you have on so that they aren't in the pictures. So this will begin our lunch break, and we'll return at 12:50. So to help with traffic as people exit the auditorium, everyone towards the front should just exit through this left door, and everyone towards the back should exit through the right door, and there'll be 2 tables set up with food. So just proceed to the table that's in front of you there. And that dismisses for lunch. Hi, everyone. We're about to get started. So welcome back. Hopefully everyone enjoyed their lunch. Up next, I'd like to introduce Team Cacti from the University at Buffalo. UB is a 3rd-time competitor in the eCTF and placed 5th overall just last year. This team was able to quickly progress into the attack phase and continue to prove they are strong contenders.
Hi, folks. My name is Joey Ma, and I'm from the team Cacti from University of Buffalo. So, okay, let's first talk about our design. So yeah, so for our design, we use the migrate the Embed TLS library to our competition board, and it turned out it's very handy once you like set it everything up. And we use mostly RSA with some runtime generated AES, and we also have the challenge response design in our unlocking unlocking function. And for the random number generator entropy, we selected to use the DWT tracing cycle. That's basically a tracing of the CPU cycles as the entropy, and do the seeding upon any user events. For example, some message come through in UART or just user press a button. So of course, a lot of flaws we realized after entering the attack phase. The first one is the crypto algorithm. The RSA is too heavy for this kind of embedded platforms, so it's very slow. And this slow has its implications later. So I will talk about it. So, and also for the pin hashing, we use the SHA 256 actually, but we found out that this one is actually weak, because I mean, if you can get the hash itself, you can do a brute force on your local. So, and even though we have a pin hashing sort there, but we made a mistake that value actually can be recovered from the FOB 0, which is public basically. And some other mistakes are like we didn't use any boot time checking for the to prevent the pin brute forcing, and yeah, and also we didn't imply timeout in the message exchange design, which could let the man in the middle attack work. And finally, the most terrible thing is that we have a buffer overflow bug in our car firmware. We actually realized this the second day we entered the attack phase, and at that time we are the only team there, and we even asked the organizers to retract our design, but it was just not possible. And yeah, this one is actually because the slow RSA. So initially in our design, the unlocking, we have two rounds of the communication. The first round is the unlocking itself. The second round is the feature for the feature. However, because the RSA is slow, with two rounds of the and so we merge them together into one round. But when we're merging, we reuse that buffer, and we were just too rushed to submit the design. Once it's passed, we just submit, and we didn't realize this. And yeah, but anyway, so okay, so let's move to the attack. So for the attacking, here's a setup. On the right is a dongle called the USB to TTL or just USB to UART. So this one is actually surprisingly cheap, and this one can basically receive and send the UART messages. So with this, on the so if you look at those two boards in the middle, we just connect them through this dongle to our computer. So basically, it can intersect, stop, or modify, or do anything with the message sent through the UART1 channel. So yeah, so this is actually pretty handy, and I don't know how many of you know this kind of device, but this kind of dongle, but this is really handy. So we can do anything we want through the the UART1 channel. So the first attack I want to talk about is replay. So the root cause is the insecure randomness there. So basically, if you flash the image on the board, it will generate the random bytes, and if you refresh it, the first time the first time, second time, third time, it will generate the same thing again. And if you refresh it again, and it will generate the same thing from start again. So we found that actually half of the designs enter the attack phase has this issue. They either they either use no randomness at all, or just use some weak entropy source. And so for the temporary fob access, we just capture the unlocking message before the state switching, and do a state switching, and just replay all the bytes with the setup I showed before. So it's very fast. And for the passive unlock flag, I just use a decoder to decode the logic analyzer captures and do the same thing. So we actually develop some automatic tools, so we can obtain like those two flags within 3 minutes. Team with this issue when they after they enter the attack phase. So it's very fast. And so the fix for this issue is like to mix different kinds of good entropy sources. For example, there's like SysTick timer, the system clock, and DWT counter, and ADC temperature sensor, or yeah, the uninitialized run is actually not a good one. Okay. And okay, so for the second attack is actually the pin brute force, and this one, the root cause is there's no boot time checking whether the system is under attack. So most team will apply a 5-second timeout or delay after an incorrect pin try. But this 5 seconds can easily be bypassed by just resetting the board, right? So maybe some of you guys know that there's a reset pin right on the board. So if you just give a low voltage signal to the reset pin, the board will just get reset, and we can just use that dongle to send a null byte there and just reset board. And yeah, so and for the parent design, most team will just send out the parent information after they verify the pin there. So we just monitor the UART1 to see whether there are any bytes. If there are bytes there, which means our the pin is correct. So basically, we need to determine two times. The first one is the boot time. This is time that the system ready for the command after a reset. And the second time is the process time, which is the time for UART the time to get the UART output after we issue the pin. So because the FOB0 the pin is known, so we just try the pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the FOB0 and get those two times, and then we do this on the FOB5 to get brute force the flag. So which if the total time of those two is less than 0.1 second, which means it's feasible. So we can get this in like 3 or 4 days in average. And the fix for this is actually to store a flag for each incorrect try and check that during the booting. So that's a good practice for this issue. And for some other attacks, the buffer overflow, of course, I know that, but this one is, I mean, I think it's the most boring thing in this conversation. I mean, we actually developed the exploit in the design phase after the reference design has been released, and so this one is just debugging, yeah. And other issues like the key exchange design. Some teams in their key exchange design, it does not rely on any stored secrets. However, they just rely on purely random generated bytes. So basically, you can build your own fob, or you can build your own car based on our design and finish the key exchange, finish the negotiation. And yeah, so this one is an issue, of course, and also other issues like some designs share the same key for the feature package and the unlocking. So potentially you can use our feature package as an unlocking message. So this is another issue. And also many teams suffer from the last one, which is a misunderstanding of the building process. And they share the same secrets across all the fob and car within a same building environment. So basically any fob can unlock any car. So also this is an issue of lack of fundamental testing. So yeah, so to make our design better, there's many things we can do. Like the first one is the crypto algorithm. We will choose the elliptic curve if we have another chance, and for the hashing of the pin, we will choose to use some key hashing algorithm instead of just the SHA-256. And yeah, of course, we should store a flag for successful operations, which means our design also suffer from that attack, pin brute force attack. And we should apply some more aggressive device reset policy. So yeah, for each for anything we do not expect to receive, we just reset port. And also it's good to add short timeouts in message exchanging to somehow prevent the man-in-the-middle attack. And also use multiple sources, multiple entropy sources in the pseudo random number generator entropy. Also add the countermeasures for side channel attacks. For example, imply some random small delays in the during the execution. This can the last one is to switch to a clone and LLVM if we use C instead of just using the GCC default by default, because the clone and the LLVM, they have some very handy flags, building flags. For example, 45 source, those flags can basically detect some of their code issues during the compile time, and also add some protections in runtime. So the last thing I want to say is that, yeah, to avoid the last minute changes, our terrible bugs was introduced because of this. So do not rush to submit your design. There's no achievements for the first one to submit design. Why we are so rushed there? So that's the most important lesson we learned. Yeah. So thank you. And yeah, any questions?
We have time for maybe one question.
Hey, so
Here's this one. Actually, it's a little louder.
So earlier you mentioned the USB, the UART to USB. Is there any noticeable delay that could affect the UART communication? Because now you're routing UART through the PC to like the fob. So does that like affect?
Yeah, the dongle itself won't introduce any delay. It's a code you write, for example, the Python script you write in there may cause some delay of the message. But you can like optimize that by like use multi-threading to to communicate with that dongle. So yeah.
Thank you.
hey, so you mentioned the buffer overflow attack that a issue that you introduced. Were you also vulnerable to the standard UART?
No, we know that the standard UART reline issue, but but I mean the UART reline, the UART buffer overflow issue is like we exploit other teams. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, a team that people have probably been waiting a while to hear from. I'd like to invite to the stage the Plaid Parliament of Pwning from Carnegie Mellon University. CMU is no stranger to the eCTF, and this is their 6th time competing. As our returning champions from last year, it is clear that this team was prepared to defend their title. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Harrison, joined up on stage by Anish and Ellie, and in the audience by most of the rest of our team, if you guys want to wave. Nice to see you guys. We were advised by doctors Anthony Rowe, Patrick Tague, and Maverick Wu, who is fortunately here in the audience with us today as well. We just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what our team's done today, as well as MITRE for putting on the competition. Brief overview, and I'll get out of the way and let Anish and Ellie talk. We're going to start off with our design, just a brief overview, much like many of the other teams have done. We're going to move into some attack highlights, one specific attack, and then some other ones that we executed as well. And we'll finish up with some lessons learned as well as some thank yous.
Hey, so I'm Ellie. So one of the main things that we thought about coming into this competition is what security principles do we need? Where do we need them? And using that, we designed our protocol. So with communicating between the car and the fob, it became apparent that we needed integrity, authentication, and confidentiality of the communication that we were doing. We actually didn't need confidentiality in all parts, but we introduced it because it made it more annoying to try to reverse what we were doing. So for example, in the package feature, we wanted a way to authenticate that any feature sent came actually from the deployment, and so that you can just spoof whatever features you wanted. So we use a private signing key, and that is never exposed to the car or the fob, but we have a public signing key to verify that, so that the car and the fob can determine, hey, did this actually come from a real deployment? And then when it comes to the actual car unlock sequence, we have both a signing key to verify the identity of the car to the fob and the fob to the car. These are separate signing keys. And then we also have separate encryption keys for the car and the fob to provide confidentiality. I think that's really the most interesting parts of our protocol. So the others are just kind of like keyed hash, not super interesting in my opinion. So we have a lot of different things that we introduced to provide security. I think I'm going to just highlight some of the most interesting ones in my opinion. I think one of the main things that was really important for this competition was a strong RNG. So I spent a lot of energy into designing an RNG using the ADC thermal sensor and adding in a little bit of redundancy. And I also put a lot of energy into validating that to make sure that it was reasonably secure. Additionally, we put a lot of energy into creating a test suite, kind of like things that we kept track of to determine, is this design breaking something that would become a problem in the competition? Does this do everything we want it to do? So that when we made changes, we could sort of make sure that like, hey, this isn't going to introduce this big bug. Additionally, we predicted that brute forcing was going to be possible if we didn't have delays. So we made sure to introduce delays while still ensuring that we would keep to the requirements and not go over that time. We also, so we also reviewed all the code that we used from external libraries to make sure there wasn't any trivial or possible exploits in that code that could spell a problem if we just kind of use without auditing. So there were definitely things that we could have improved on. With our cryptography, we actually used two different methods for signing and validating authentication and integrity, and also confidentiality through a different encryption method. Ideally, we were using Diffie-Hellman to do that key exchange. Ideally, using AEAD through single protocol through that whole process might have been better, but we didn't really want to like roll our own crypto, try to modify things. So we were like, well, let's just use two different methods of doing this that we're reasonably sure should work. We should have used additional sources for entropy. That was more just kind of a time limitation. We didn't have time to verify that that was correct. Additional countermeasures for power analysis. We tried to do our best, but that's something I was a little bit paranoid that there might have been things that we didn't account for. Additionally, for defeating our design, the main thing is if you could control that ADC source, then you would have a method for defeating our randomness. If the power's side channel attacks were not fully random, there might have been some problem there. We didn't explore that, but it's something I was paranoid of. And you could actually cool the board to cause the RNG to take longer due to the method of debiasing that we used. So that could technically violate the timing constraint, but in practice, this wasn't something that we actually observed as feasible.
Yeah, so I'm Anish, and I'm going to talk about some of our attacks. So one of my favorite attacks, and something that hasn't really been mentioned today, is a timing side channel attack. And we use this on several teams for extracting the pairing pin to get the pin extraction and the temporary fob access. So the way that this worked is that the functions memcomp and strcomp, which are frequently used to compare the pin against the correct pin, leak a little bit of information about how many digits are correct. That pseudocode in the top corner uses a loop to check the correct pin against the expected pin, and that is what memcomp and strcomp look like internally. The attack that we ran was that we would try each possible prefix of the pairing pin, so 0000, 1000, 2000, and then measure the amount of runtime of the code between when we sent the last digit of the pin and when we saw the failure message. And by plotting the results from this timing attack, we can figure out which one takes the longest because it has to run 2 iterations of the loop instead of 1. And this allows us to extract the first digit of the pin, We can then repeat this to extract each individual digit of the pin, and instead of requiring a full brute force over the entire pin space, it only requires a brute force over each character, which means it reduces the millions of attempts to just a couple hundred attempts, which means that even if there are delays in the code, we can still execute this attack in a feasible amount of time. And the way we did the measurement was by using a logic analyzer. So we had a pretty nice lab setup. Analog devices make this logic analyzer, the ADLM 2000. We did data extraction where we would kind of run a script to run through different pin codes, extract the data, plot it, figure out the first digit, and then repeat this process. And this stems from a realistic attack. So the well-known attacks Spectre and Meltdown were actually based partly on a timing attack where you would exploit timing variations in the microarchitecture of the processor in order to extract data. And this is relatively a specific attack to embedded systems in some ways. So this is not an attack that a lot of people think about unless they've looked into specifically embedded systems attacks. This isn't an attack you could say do over the network usually. And the countermeasures for this are either exponentially increasing lockouts. Like I mentioned, the 5-second lockout isn't enough because we only need a couple hundred attempts, or constant time comparison function. So it's possible to write a comparison function using bitwise operation that will take the same amount of time to run regardless of how much of the data is correct. And that is what we used, and that's what we noticed some teams use to defend against this kind of an attack. Other attacks that we ran, so for teams that used a clock-based random number generator, we did a replay dictionary attack where we would reset the board, wait a certain amount of time, attempt to unlock the card to kind of get the temp fob access. This is an attack that's been used by several other teams and explained several times today. Buffer overflows were the standard one, things like UART read line and missized buffers. Exploitation of weak cryptography, either keys being leaked or keys that were repeated. Clock glitching, which was another big attack that we did on teams where we were able to kind of inject a fault into the clock signal, and this would allow us to skip or corrupt the execution of an instruction. This is not a super visual attack, so it's hard to explain without actually experimenting with it, but it was one that was very effective. And in a couple cases, when there was very, very little entropy, we were able to just purely brute force either an unlock or a pin. And some key takeaways. So opponent systems, good RNG. Teams that used good RNG were hard to defeat. Teams that used Rust, this means takes out buffer overflows and memory attacks, and it inadvertently adds an obscurity factor where a lot of us didn't necessarily know Rust, so it was a lot harder to even just triage the code. Attacks that could have worked against us is power analysis or particularly invasive hardware attacks. We did protect against fault injection with random times and duplicated checks, but particularly invasive attacks could possibly have worked. And what we would have done with more time and resources, we would have worked on power analysis or voltage glitching, which would work on teams that don't use the external clock signal. Figure out how to work together, split up the work, red team, and test each other's work, and build the most secure system that we could.
So thank you everyone for listening. Big thank you to our advisors as well as the staff, faculty and staff of Scilab, EC department, and I&I for their support throughout this process, as well as throughout some of our sponsors, without whom the majority of our team would not be able to be here today, as well as food and things like that. So thank you guys for your time, and we'll be interested in hearing any questions you have for us.
You mentioned it briefly, you have a very large team. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you partitioned work and used 14 people effectively and 3 advisors?
Of course. So one of our advisors was much more active, very, very active. And he did a lot of questioning, I guess. But when it came down to the team itself, in the initial portion of the competition, the build phase, we split up by functional area. So we looked at people who wrote the portion for the actual building of deployment versus the pin versus the enabling feature. And then as well as we had some folks looking at like compiler countermeasures and whatnot. We moved to the attack phase. We separated out into 3 functional areas. We had an intelligence and synthesis team, which looked specifically at like overall designs, whether they were cryptographically and secure and whether the protocol was secure. We had a team that was dedicated to looking at how to rapidly attack boards. So that was buffer overflows, things along those lines. And then we had another team who was looking more at the advanced attacks, such as glitching and things along those lines. So.
Right, I don't have a question, instead I have a comment that you mentioned a countermeasure against the timing attack would be to do the whole loop where you XOR compare then use OR to reduce. I'd like to comment that the reduction variable, one way to make sure that works is to use a volatile keyword for the reduction variable, because otherwise, I don't know if this actually happens, but a sufficiently smart compiler might recognize you're just doing memcmp and then optimize it into a memcmp call. So this would be an instance of that phrase that a sufficiently advanced compiler can be indistinguishable from an adversary.
Yeah, that is something we actually thought about, and part of our, before releasing our code, was to literally read through the assembly and make sure our compiler wasn't screwing us.
Yeah, I saw from one of the slides that you guys do EEPROM encryption. Where is that encryption key stored?
So the EEPROM encryption key is still stored in the flash, so it doesn't necessarily add another layer of security as much as making it just harder to attack. If the attacker manages to read out a small portion of EEPROM inadvertently, that won't give them our cryptographic material. They would have to read all of flash, all of EEPROM, and reverse it.
So when you're using the timing side channel attack against the pins, could you also do that if the pin is hashed by just comparing what the first byte will be?
Yes, actually, one of the attacks we did have to do this on a hashed pin, where we came up with pins that would generate each possible first byte of the hash and then just use it as a proxy variable to do the attack.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you can speak a little bit more about the glitching attack you guys pulled off.
Yeah, sure. So the way that the clock glitching attack works is basically it violates the internal timing constraints inside of the CPU. The idea being that we insert a very small glitch, which is not enough to fully cycle the CPU, but short enough where it will cause the program counter to increment and some part of the instruction to execute, but not be committed back. So if there was, say, a branch instruction, we could just entirely skip that by causing it to be parsed but not executed. And in order to do this, we had to do a lot of tuning of the parameters for the glitch, as well as figuring out kind of via brute force, figure out where exactly in the code we need to glitch. Is there something specific?
I was wondering, like, hardware-wise, how are you pulling off that?
So the kind of common hardware platform you may have heard of for glitching is the Chip Whisperer. That is what we used, but yeah, a lot of it was kind of implementing the glitch attack on our end.
Hi, we have a question from online. Ritwick from IITM says, we noticed the CMU poster had a mention of a TRNG, but a temperature sensor based RNG that we could notice during the attack phase is PRNG at best. Was there anything else that we missed?
Oh, I think it was more so like if, I'm trying to recall what's exactly was on the poster, but if we could have improved things, ideally it'd be better to use like a chip TRNG. We tried to model our RNG around TRNG design. So I might have called it a TRNG in that sense that we're emulating, a real hardware source for RNG. But, validating it's cryptographically secure can be difficult. We tried our best.
So I had a follow-up question on the clock glitching. Were you able to do this on all designs, or did they have to be using the external clock?
Yeah, so the clock glitching attacks that we executed during the competition were on designs that were using the external clock. Something that we were working on up until the last minute but did not finish was voltage glitching, which would work on anything.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, we were a little bit paranoid about damaging things, so we kind of put it off towards the end because we're like, well, let's just do the safer stuff because if we break the attack boards, that's a huge pain.
Thank you. Next, we have another short break. We'll try to resume in just under 5 minutes. So if you just quickly need to use the restroom or get another refreshment, please do that and then come. All right, we're back. So now it is time for the awards presentations. If your team is in attendance when your name is called, please come up to the stage to accept your awards. As a general reminder for the teams that presented, these posters are for you to take home if you wish. I also want to welcome to the stage Eli Baum and Fritz Stein. These two have helped me over the past year run this competition, and they're going to help me hand out the awards as they're announced. So first, I want to congratulate every team that competed this year. Whether you place in the top or not, your accomplishments do not go unnoticed. And even if you just ended up getting your design finished by the end of the competition, we recognize that that is an incredible achievement, and you should be proud of anything you've learned from this competition. The first special recognition award is presented to a team that went above and beyond our expectations to create and share a comprehensive write-up detailing their experiences in the attack phase. This award is presented to the students of the University of New Haven. Congratulations. Thank you, University of New Haven. Sure. All right. The second special recognition award is awarded to the team with the most innovative uses of hardware attacks to successfully capture flags. This award goes to Carnegie Mellon University, Plaid Parliament of Pwning. Woohoo! Final special recognition award goes to the team who had the highest scoring poster by our panel of expert judges at our poster session on Monday. This award is presented to Team Boilers from Purdue University. Now for the final results. So the final scores are not only just what you see on the scoreboard.
So they're a combination of design phase flags, defensive points, offensive points, documentation points, and poster points. Both the documentation points and the poster points were added after the fact, after the organizers and our judges had a chance to review your designs. You can also see in this pie chart, it broken down further by more categories. This really shows how important it is to enter the attack phase as early as possible, as you start to accrue a bunch of defensive points and get the chance to capture flags from other teams. This chart shows all those different scores over time. Right in the middle there is our handoff phase. So you can see that once teams start entering that attack phase, they'll either start accruing defensive points, or in some cases, start capturing every flag that gets released within 30 minutes. The graph on the left here zooms in on the attack phase. And on the right, we had something really interesting happen on the last day. And there was a few lead changes as teams raced for third place in the preliminary standings. So this was really, really exciting for us to watch as it came down the stretch. And without further ado, in third place, we have the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And in second place, we have University of California, Santa Cruz. Congratulations. And finally, in first place, congratulations to Carnegie Mellon University for defending their title. A total of 79 flags captured is really impressive. Do you want to hand out the trophies? Those are also.
That's good right there. And you guys get scooped from that. You switch over. Actually, no, you guys are fine. The three on the there you go. I just want to be able to see you guys.
Hold your trophies up. Yeah, higher, higher. Yeah.
And also to CMU, we do want one more team photo outside by the stairs after this ends. And just so everyone can see all the final scores, here's a breakdown of what the scoreboard looked like a week ago and what it looks like today after we did documentation and poster scoring. So you can quickly scroll through and try to find your final positioning. And with that, I'll invite Dan Walters up to the stage for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Kyle. Wow. What a day. Another round of applause for everybody. So we heard from some amazing teams today. I'm blown away, as I'm sure many of you are, and hopefully the sponsors are blown away, and the other faculty advisors, watching what other teams have done. We heard from some great industry speakers today as well. Had some great discussion. I really enjoyed talking with many of you at lunch and in the breaks. And of course, congratulating and honoring the award winners. But I think the best part of all this is the getting together, the talking, the engaging, the chance to, ask a team, not just, how did you do that, but like, how awesome was that when, this happened, and it's sharing in that excitement. So hopefully you got the chance to have those discussions. If you didn't, there's still time, right? We'll have more mingling and time to network and have all those discussions later on. But in closing, before we go to that phase, I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you. I think the first one is good news for the students. If you enjoyed this competition, if you had a lot of fun doing everything that you did over the last semester, this could be your life. And there's a lot of opportunity to keep doing that. Again, talk to the sponsors. They're looking for you to come and join their team to help. There's so many opportunities to keep doing that. But you might be thinking, well, okay, but how do I make that next step? What are the other things we should do? What does life look like after eCTF? So I have a few tips for you on that. And I think the biggest one is, in general, keep learning, right? What you encountered in this competition is just the tip of the iceberg. Even for those of you that did really well and clearly know a lot in this space, there is so much to learn in embedded security. It really is its own field. I think that's not fully recognized yet, but you're hopefully starting to see that. So there's a lot to learn. And unfortunately, if you say, yeah, I want to throw myself into this, there's not really a clear defined path. You can't just say, I'm going to change majors to embedded security, right? Because it doesn't exist. There's no degree for embedded security. Even at the master's level, there's really not a lot there. So, what do you do? Where can you go to find those next places? So there are ways. Number one, I'm going to give you is to talk to faculty advisors, and not just the faculty advisor that you're already talking to on your current team. I'm going to give out a challenge to all of you. Go and talk to somebody that's in the faculty at your school that's not in the department where your major's at. So if you're a CS major, go talk to the ECE professors. Learn more about hardware. If you're on the ECE side, go talk to someone in cybersecurity, okay? There's not enough crosstalk in these fields, and you're hopefully seeing that multidisciplinary engagement, that is so necessary in this field. The teams that did really well, and all of you, I think, to some degree, you all had that a little bit. We want to grow it. So that's number one. The other is get involved in the research. There's a lot of really cool research going on at a lot of the universities that you're at. You're probably aware of that, but you might not be. So find out if there's opportunities to get involved in student research at your university. Again, talk to your advisors. It might not necessarily be the ones that you know very well. Talk to advisors at other schools here, right? There might be programs at another school and the one that you're at that you want to get involved in for master's or PhD work at some point. Next, I'll say go make a club. So you all kind of have a club right now, your team, right? And some of you have much more than that. PPP is a very mature club. So look at what they're doing. Talk to them about how they organize their club. I think we want to see more of those sort of communities at schools pop up where you get that pipeline flow of you're teaching the new students, you're recruiting them in, you're showing them how much fun this can be and helping them along the way through the different activities that you can do. It's not just eCTF that you can do with your club, okay? So to keep the club active year-round, go seek out other challenges. You'll find there's not really anything as good as eCTF, okay? So that's too bad, but you can do eCTF again. But in the meantime, there are other things. So there's Seesaw, has an embedded security challenge each year. A lot of the conferences are starting to have them look at host, look at Ches. So there's other things at DEF CON, has a biohacking village, badge hacking. So go and do those other things and it'll help to strengthen you so that now next time when you do eCTF, you've got a bunch of tools built up, you've got more know-how that you're bringing from the start. And then finally, know that when you go into industry, you can learn on the job. Okay, so don't be concerned, don't be scared that, hey, this embedded security thing seems really fun. I love doing eCTF, but I'm a CS major, don't know a lot about hardware, or I'm an EE major, don't really fully understand all the cyber stuff yet. That's okay. I mean, I'd like to fix that, and we're working on it. But I can tell you, most companies that are hiring for these skills, they know that this isn't a major yet. So what are they doing? They're hiring students and they're teaching them on the job. They have established programs in place. Many of them do. MITRE's, it's called the MITRE Institute. We'll teach you on the job. So you come in with what you know, and we'll teach you the rest. So that's great news for you. Next, faculty advisors. We need your help, okay? We want to keep growing this event. I think we all saw how much more fun it is. The more the merrier. Like this year we grew a ton, but we don't want to stop. We want to grow it more. So faculty advisors, you can help us with this. If you've got colleagues at another university that's not yet participating, reach out to them. Let them know, hey, why don't you have a team? My team did quite well this year. Where are you guys at? Tease them a little bit. Use that power of the competition that really motivates all the students. It can also motivate you and motivate your colleagues. So help us spread the word. But then also, we need more curriculum, right? So I'd challenge any of the faculty that are here today to tell me what are the classes that teach all the skills that you saw the students have in this competition that they had to somehow obtain to do well in this competition. What classes today teach all those things? I know there are some. I'm involved with teaching one at UMass, but there's not many. And so we want to change that. And I think the only way we change that is to really spread the awareness to the faculty that this is an important area. There's a huge demand from industry, for US economy, but also for US national security. We need these skills more. We need your help in building the curriculum to teach it. Okay. And then lastly, please, like, I think this is such a big, important thing that we're doing, you know, to build up the embedded security engineers of the future. Can't do it alone. Would love to talk and brainstorm with anybody that has ideas. How can we make this better? How can we take this to the next level? Please reach out, and we would love to have those conversations. We can continue to have some of them right now. And so with that, I'd then like to ask Ajit to come join me back up on the stage, and we'll just close out by, we need to thank the team. We had such a huge team that helped make this possible today, and throughout the last semester. So we have a lot of people to thank, both on the Engenuity and the lab side.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Yeah, I want you to know, to put this event together, it took a lot of planning, a lot of work on behalf of MITRE, with working with Dan's team and with my team and Engenuity and our marketing teams, to be able to, you know, when you look at wall posters and all that, the amount of planning and everything to be able to get you all here and be able to help fund the travel and to be able to put this event and have it live streamed. Our team worked really hard. All the people in the corner back there, I want everyone from MITRE to stand up, and for MITRE Engenuity. Please give them all a really big round of applause. I think our teams are going to get a good night's sleep tonight after yesterday and the last few days. We're really happy we could have this event, Dan, and I'm glad that we actually were able to get it face to face, because it's been too long.
Absolutely, yeah. A few quick shout outs. You know, I gotta say thank you to the senior leaders at MITRE and MITRE Engenuity, Lori Giandomenico, Doug Robbins. The support has been tremendous, and again, I don't think this could have happened before this year. We were entirely funded through MITRE overhead, and that you know, came with that we had to have a lot of support to make that possible. So thank you to Doug. Moise, who's here today, has been a huge advocate, really helped out. The team that with all the day-to-day, Kyle, you did an outstanding job, and the whole team in supporting. I have to call out Ben Janis. I think everybody here probably knows Ben from either this year or previous years. He's been instrumental. We're all very sad that he couldn't make it today, but man, what a rock star! And by the way, started his career with the eCTF, and then Fritz, thank you. You'll be seeing more of him. Eli Baum, Valenzuela, Aaron Sedia, and then we've even had folks that have helped in the eCTF in previous years come back and help out because they just have so much fun. Jake Greisel, 4-time eCTF competitor again. So the team is huge and great, and it's a really fun team. Maybe one day you guys will be a part of it. But thank you everybody.
And for my team, I want to also thank Brendan, who helped work to get the sponsor program going. I want to also call out Casey, who has been the party planner of all party planners, literally, to pull together this whole event, as well as the marketing team under Christine Boyles. So Nikki Konis back there, Karen from operations, Kim Wong from operations and MITRE Engenuity. Who else am I saying? I'm sure I'm going to miss a few people here, but they've all been working together. As you are thinking about how you have to work together with a whole bunch of teams to get your people to get things done, we had to do the same thing. So it's been an amazing event to be able to work cross-functionally across MITRE to be able to do this. So I thank my team and everyone from Engenuity, and I also thank Dan's team as well for being great to work with.
All right, go mingle.